and I just actually built one of these little TauLink modules recently. So that was one success out of 4 tries. So I'm not quite there yet. I'm also not yet ready for doing software developing, but down the line I think I could do that. I've got a bunch of the different hardware, and I'm willing to test just about anything. So that's where I'm at right now. And I don't know how to tell who's next on the list. Do that. I don't know.
I can take over for this one if I want. Next to you, Doug, I see somebody called E. So, E, do you wanna introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Eric. VArched on the forums. Been following what you guys have been doing for a long time since the breakup at OpenPilot. I actually was pretty happy when that happened because I thought it was pretty crazy there. Yeah, so been following along for a long time. I'm a software engineer by trade. Currently here just because I'm pretty excited about the Dronen fork. I feel like I'm kind of inspired to contribute more now. I'd like to work on UI, branding, that kind of thing. Maybe try to give things a little bit more of a cool look. Yeah, so that's why I'm here. I'm excited for this opportunity and just here to see what happens.
Who are you passing it to, Eric?
Okay, I can take over on this one also if you want to finish the line. I have James next to Eric. James?
One of them.
James, that would be...
There's 2 James. First one to unmute wins.
That would be James Cotton.
Hey, I'm James. I'm Peabody124. I'm one of the OmniLoco founders and developer from TauLabs. I'm mostly listening because I'm at work.
Very good. And there's James number 2. If you want to introduce yourself.
He doesn't have a microphone.
Oh.
Okay. Oh my.
That's Oh my from IRC.
Okay, so I mean, introduction in IRC. That's introduction in the chat. That's fine, I guess.
I guess Martin.
Yeah, I can go next. I'm Martin Lucy. I'm HRED on the forum or BrainFPV. I'm the founder of BrainFPV. I have a GitHub account, BrainFPV, and there is also an MLewis secret GitHub account. Yeah, I manufactured a brain board, and yeah, I've been involved in TauLabs for a year or so. Next is, I don't know, Stacy, maybe.
Stack.
Hey, so I'm Stacy, OpenPilot developer from way back, TauLabs developer, and I'm on the board. So I'm here to hopefully find out what everybody's up to and which way we should go next.
Let's see.
Mike hasn't introduced himself, I think.
All right, I'm Mike Lyle, known as IC on IRC, and I think on the forums as well. I'm relatively new to the TauLabs project. Been around for, I think, 5 or 6 months. But I've been pretty deeply involved in across large levels of the software. Most recently, I acted as release manager, putting together the most recent TauLabs release. And just looking at where to go forward from here. A few of us put together a fork called Dronen because we had some issues with how things were working within the broader TauLabs community. But would like to find out a way that we can avoid duplication of effort and all work effectively together.
Okay, I can see, let's see, next to Michael on my screen I have John. John,
hey guys.
Introduce yourself. Long time no chat.
Long time no chat, Edward. So John Driggers, systems guy on the forum. I think my only claim to fame is I have more hardware to crash than most people do. My introduction to Tau was when Edward pointed out to me there were options to OpenPilot a couple of years ago. That's me.
And I have Lolo next to John. If you can hear us.
I think he said he's also without a mic. Lolo RC on GitHub.
Okay. That's fine. And the last one I have on my list would be Matt. If you have a mic.
So we have Matt and AJ both. Matt's not talking today. See above. So AJ.
Okay. So it looks to me like everyone on the list got introduced. Ken, what do you think?
So I'm not sure if we've heard from AJ yet.
I could just go quickly. Yeah, AJ Christensen. I'm Fujin on IRC, GitHub, and the forums. Mostly just a pilot, but I've been hacking on the Brain Gear for about a year. I ported AcroPlus from OpenPilot and extended the Brain OSD. I ported Brain to Chibios RT. Just been fucking around in the code, really, doing whatever the hell I feel like. Here to see what happens for the future.
Awesome. I think that's everybody. By the way, I saw Jose pop in. Jose PT pop out. That's a shame. Jose is also a board member, and I think he's got a valuable opinion on this. But I suspect we're in some sense the victim of technology. And I'm hearing from Mike that my internet connection is a bit marginal, and I drop out a little from time to time. Ouch. I'm concerned if I leave this that it might end. I'll kill the video as per the suggestion. All right.
It might just end up that you need to be repeating yourself at the worst.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to start off by saying that first and foremost, this is not a conversation where we are going to solve problems. If for no other reason than we have a limited bandwidth, it's hard to talk over this connection, and there's a bunch of people whose voices need to be heard, and we simply don't have the time today to listen to them all. So what I think today's value is showing that there is an extremely high motivation in the community to get together and members in the channel, and I know I saw Jose out there, so we have 6 board members who are actively interested in resolving this problem. There are only 8 members in total, so in short notice, and here's Jose, that's great. In short notice, we were able to demonstrate that this is important to us, and we hear you, and equivalently, you're demonstrating to us how important this is to you. So while we're not going to solve the problem, I think what we will get is a few actionable ideas, people who will then take on the task of filling in this next, taking the next step. And hopefully this process can't take forever. There's no reason for it to take forever. We have a lot of very good ideas already out there, and what we need to do is find out what is the right balance that lets the TauLabs board recognize that we have kind of become distracted by life, and all you guys are out there making excellent contributions. We need to transfer the ability to you guys to be involved in day-to-day operations. At the same time, understand that the TauLabs board founded this project. This is a project that we all feel very strongly about, and even if we can't be involved in day-to-day process, I don't think it's realistic to expect that the outcome of this will be the TauLabs board resigning, because this is important to us. And if the best scenario that we can arrive at is there is a potential fork, and that is with our blessing, because if it's not a good home for you, we're not going to fight to keep you. This is an open pilot. So let me just go through the agenda really quickly. I mentioned a few points on the agenda. Let me pull it up here. The first is, so we kind of introduced the board. We're missing Angus, and who else are we missing? We're missing one more. Anybody? Sorry?
Vincent.
Vince, yes, thank you. Vince is missing. So Angus and Vince are missing. But those are the other two people. Vince is the guy who runs the... make sure that nothing merges that instantly breaks. And Angus is actually one of the co-founders of OmniLoco, which is what ultimately led to TauLabs. So Angus and Chebaz go way far back, much further than the rest of us. I'm going to skip through number 2. Slower. So number 2 is read online comments from the Made for the community and board. I'm going to skip through that, except to say that in general, the comments are very positive about the willingness to do something, both from the board and from the community. It sounds like everybody has identified that there is a problem, and where that problem lies, we kind of need to, where the line is for that problem is gray, of course, but we recognize that we are on the wrong side of it. And there seems to be a lot of alignment between the community and the board about good steps that we have for moving forward. So now I'd like to sort of, I mentioned that if you had a 2-minute introduction, or a 2-minute, what do I want to say, a 2-minute, introductory point, this is a great time to do that. So if anybody's out there and would like to speak for a quick couple minutes, please, now's the time to take the floor.
All right, I'll start off. So this is IC. Basically, we've talked about a lot of different ways that we can adjust governance, or different technical mechanisms, or different technology choices. And I'm not sure that that's the real answer here. I think there's a little bit of a cultural problem within the project, to be honest, in that you know, I came along, I was super excited, I managed to insert myself and get involved at a pretty deep level, but there was a whole lot of conflict that was necessary in order to get to that point. It was very difficult, it took a whole lot of persistence, and at times I felt that I had no visibility into what was going on, or that you know, I could go and work for a very long time on something and the project might just decide not to take it. And I think that if that's the tack that we take going forward, that kind of indifference bordering on hostility to new contributors, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to get the next, you know, 3 or 4 people that are going to energize this project, and are going to build a critical mass, and are going to let us to actually move forward quickly and be innovative. You know, and I don't think that that's a question of anyone personally per se. I mean, people individually were very welcoming to me, but just, you know, I think we can be a little bit kinder on IRC and pull requests, in helping people to become part of the project. And I think that's a lot of the reason why people are so excited about Dronin, and that they feel that they can jump in, make a difference right away, and that there wasn't really room for them at Tau to do those same kinds of things. So really, that's where I'm coming from. That's where the overall motivation to fork came from in the first place, and I think that that's the core problem that we need to be solved. On the other hand, we probably have to do some concrete things in terms of procedures and technical mechanisms and things in order to demonstrate that kind of commitment and make it clear that that's the direction that the project's really going in. That's how I see things.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Anybody else want to just
I'll take a
couple minutes?
I'll take a couple minutes. and okay?
Yeah. Sorry, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So I think it would be helpful to remember a little bit of history. We started OmniLoco and TauLabs with the intent that if a new person or any person in the project disagreed with someone, they would not be driven out, right? One person would have all the power. We didn't have a benevolent dictator running the project. So we looked into it, and the way to go forward was to create a legal entity, right? And the legal entity has to be governed by a board. So we created the board of directors, and we actually added provisions within the governing documents of this legal entity, of the OmniLoco Foundation, that allowed for, this almost this exact scenario where it is difficult to get all the boards together regularly, certainly weekly or any, more than once a year, and make decisions. So there's actually provisions within the governance that allow for committees that are given powers within the foundation to solve all these issues. And that was one of the things I suggested might be a solution to this. And I'm sure we'll probably talk about it more, but I would just like to have everyone keep in mind that there is, and I certainly agree, there's an overhead with this, but there is a historical and a very valid reason why it was organized that way, and hopefully we can make everybody happy, but and improve at the very least improve the project. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Awesome. Anyone else?
Can I say something?
Please.
Yeah. So to me, it seems somehow. By now, I have met several of the board members, or I guess the majority. But it is, I think, the case that yes, I understand the board members are the founding members of the project, but for a new developer, it seems kind of like there is like a secret gremium almost that kind of controls the project from behind the scenes, and so there's basically no communication from the board to the public, and yeah, these are basically people who are not really involved in the like not everybody, but there are several board members who are not involved in the project, but still can make basically the decisions about the project, and I think that's for an open source project that's not ideal. And I understand that these people, they're proud of the project and they founded it, but I think they should be willing to step down if they're not actually actively involved in it. I mean, nobody takes away the fact that they founded the project and they can be proud of it when it grows and their names are forever there, but I think it's a bit strange basically not put a lot of effort into a project but still have the power to make decisions for the project, in my opinion.
All right, that's a very fair and cogent point. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just had a couple things to say. Just, I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know what the possibilities are of changing things to get to where, well, for myself, so I've been around for a long time, but I've never really felt inspired to contribute. I didn't feel like part of the project. I respect what you guys have done a lot. I like you all. You're cool. The project's great. But I've never gotten a feeling, I've never been inspired to contribute. Once the Droden fork kind of happened, all of a sudden I found all kinds of inspiration. I want to be part of this. I feel like my ideas matter, my contribution matters, or like Icy said, it's not going to get squashed or just ignored or something like that. So for me, if there's a way to change the structure so that myself, other new devs feel more ownership, more buy-in, then ultimately that would be what I would be looking for.
Okay. Anyone else? Just give it another few seconds in case someone's being slow. Hey, Jose, if you're out there. Oh, sorry.
Cool. Hey, sorry, I just wanted to make a quick point, if that's alright. Yeah, cool. So I mostly fly, I'm sure as you all know, FPV racing and acrobatics, so I have essentially no use for the outer loops or upper loop functionality in TauLabs whatsoever. What I've come to realize is that in the last 6 months, what we do have for the inner loop system, actuators and stabilization is excellent. You know, there's nothing really that competes with it on an equal playing field, and I don't think any human can manually tune to the level that the auto-tune produces. Now, I mostly fly with commercial closed gear, so the point that we're having a big discussion about on the forums that we keep coming back to is the open versus closed nature of the history of the project, the philosophy that surrounds that, and how that kind of guides every decision that we go through. So like, oh, can we do this? Can we test with this? And basically getting turned down at every turn when anything involves closed gear. It has to be done out of tree and so on and so forth. So it's really, really complicated to be a contributor and only have closed gear on TauLabs and switch between the trees and stuff like that. There's a lot of like tooling and automation stuff that we can do there to make that easier. We've obviously like cranked on that real rapidly in Ronin and been able to screw around with closed gear, which are obvious derivatives of like previous research into 303s and other F4 boards and stuff like that, like very much common code. I just really would like to see, I don't feel like there's a very valuable boundary there between the closed and open thing, and then like we've had the whole open nays, Rev 4, Rev 5, read error, basically reverse engineered it and then produced some schematics, and we were okay with that. Like that's fine, you know, like we don't even, and realistically that's a clone, right? And Dongs didn't approve it, and we were like fuck Dongs, like who cares about time cop, we're gonna do it anyway. And I think like that had repercussions, right? We basically said that we're kind of okay with cloned closed hardware, and we've been making strides towards closed hardware as well. I think the other example of this is the PIOS SPI CMOS MUX OSD that's hopefully being added to core soon for Peabody's Tau OSD, but it's presently only available in the Brain FPV, right? So you have to use closed gear to use this TauLabs functionality, and it's out of tree. I would really like to see all of that go away. And yeah, I think like the whole having the schematic for working on a board does help a lot, but when you have like the information from other firmware, that's been fine for me so far. But you know, it's obviously much more error prone, and you can get a lot more work done with a schematic. And then that leads on to the discussion about target maintainers, I think, and being able to have people with like authority over a particular area of the TauLabs source base without having to like basically wait around for weeks for review from people who aren't familiar with it. Sorry, those were lots of points. Happy to go into details more.
No, that's absolutely great, and I'm sure you understand that it's going to be hard to tackle all of that in this conversation. But I also think everybody understands that it's important to tackle all. Anyone else wants to step forward? All right, I see a raised hand.
Yeah, hi. I had a similar issue on the closed hardware issue. Obviously, I've mentioned before that I had at one point wanted to pick up a brain board and play around with it. I'll play with just about any hardware, but I didn't want to have both the TauLabs GCS running as well as another one that might be required for that. I just basically converted everything I when I switched over to TauLabs, I converted everything over, and I switched from CleanFlight, and I don't use any CleanFlight stuff anymore. I like the idea of sticking with one program package, and really, as much as I'd like to try other hardware, I'd like to try that hardware on this unit. So whatever can be done, obviously, any effort to have the closed source, closed hardware as part of the main structure is a positive thing. In addition to that, the people that are actually making a profit off of this then have a reason to encourage development in TauLabs. A good example of this can be seen in obviously the big guy, Drone Code APM, which they have, what is it, 3D and PixOC lines, and they have a commitment to making sure that drone code is a big deal. So, and yes, if we had a very popular closed board that ran TauLabs, and they were making some money off of it, then obviously those people would want to see more development and would be putting more time and effort into it. And that's why I think it's a really positive thing to encourage the closed boards to be a part of it.
Yeah, just to chime in very briefly on this point, the reason why I'm around is because...
Mike, I appreciate you want to chime in, but I really do want to keep the 2-minute intros, and then we'll get to the rest. I don't mean to cut anyone off. It's just
Okay.
We've got 15 people. I promise we'll get back to all your points. Write them down, keep them in mind. I'm taking good notes as everyone's writing, and notice is also being cast out over YouTube and being recorded. So no points will get lost. So if there's no one else, is that a no? Okay. Let's open the floor to address the following questions that I put on the forum. I'm going to read them all 4, and then if people think that's appropriate, we'll just go down the list one by one. The first one is how much power can be transferred to an executive committee. That's not should be, but could be. Chebaz has already helped open that topic. Number 2 is how would a democratically elected committee look like? 3, how would we choose voters? And 4, what other options are there? So let's start off with how much could be. As I think about it, let's first at this point, and then we can go to the next question, which is how much in that can be, as in should be. The TauLabs board members at that point and say what we think we're prepared to cede in the way of our governance authority over the project that we gave birth to. Does that sound fair? David, would you start?
Sure. So you cut out there for a little bit, but I think you wanted me to address first off how much power could be transferred to an executive committee. Is that right, Ken?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
According to the bylaws of the corporation, which are your guiding principles, right? What we are legally allowed to do. Executive committee can do everything except for there are a few powers that have to be legally reserved to the board of directors, such as one example would be an executive committee could not amend or repeal bylaws. So if they found something that they wanted to change within the governing documents, that would have to go through the board of directors. They couldn't dissolve the foundation. That would lie with the board of directors itself. Couldn't sell assets of the foundation, which is easy because there are no assets. So, I mean, other than I guess no, that's not true. I should change that. So the domains, trademarks, I don't believe we filed for any trademarks, but kind of the intellectual property, if you will, of the foundation. Is held and wielded by the board of directors. But besides that, an executive committee can be empowered with all of the powers of a foundation. So that's what they can do.
So on the side, a couple people have asked, is it possible for the community to see the document? But I'm not showing people to truck out to Las Vegas to do this. Could we make sure, could you take that as an action item to just remind the community where they can find the incorporation documents?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I'm sorry, I forgot your real name, but VART has been helping me better the OmniLocal webpage, and I can get them posted on there as soon as we get that up and going. So I can definitely take that as an action item to get them posted and you know, kind of broadcast it.
Thanks. Jose points out there's a link on the forum, so it might be enough just to remind people, maybe inside the community discussion thread that I started, that here's the documentation. I mean, obviously, I think this has particular value to show people that this is for real. This is serious. We identified a catastrophic problem at OpenPilot, and we solved it. And our solution might not have been the world's best solution, but it was a damn good solution, and we can't simply do anything we want. We actually have a legal obligation to the TauLabs spirit, and I think you point out things that are important, like the fact that the executive committee cannot change the bylaws, it can't dissolve the assets of the foundation, etc. So with that in mind, let's open up pretty widely, and I'm going to ask people to take 1 minute to speak when it's their turn, and nobody should be interrupting anybody. And do try and yield the floor when possible, because I know we all have a lot of thoughts here, but take 1 minute and let's talk about what powers we should transfer from the OmniLoco board of directors to a hypothetical executive committee. Do I have a first taker?
Sure, I'll go first. I'm probably talking way too much here, but I think a big problem, and as I researched this recently when Mike brought it up, it seems to be a common problem throughout nonprofits, is that the board of directors are volunteers, right? They have families, day jobs, other projects that take their time, so it's hard for them to commit the amount of time necessary, full-time, that it would be to properly, you know, be involved in everything they should be. So I think a lot of the things brought up by Mike are valid points, and so getting to the point, I think a lot of the day-to-day operations should be relegated to an executive committee. I think things such as the merging and of code, the development, the management of forums and all that should be relegated to a committee. Since the people in the committee would be the people who are currently active, and keep in mind that just because someone's a board member, they could actually be part of the executive committee if they were very active at the time. You know, I'm a part-time farmer, so during the winter I'll have a lot more time and could be, for example, part of that executive committee during that time. That's all I have to say. I hope that was more than a minute.
That's perfect. That's right on the minute. Who else? 1 minute.
I can give a quick thought. My basic idea was that if you were going to do an executive committee, give them all the power and make it so that they have to respond within like an objective time. So if the community needs a decision from the executive board, make it so that they have to respond in 24 hours. If that doesn't work, it bubbles up to the board, and if you guys don't respond in another 24 hours, then basically it's Lord of the Flies and we hire a new board of executives or something like that. I don't want to ever be in the position where we have a community decision that needs to happen with a short turnaround and we cannot get an answer from either the new board that we're talking about, the executive committee, sorry, or the board. That's basically my ideas on the thought.
Okay. Jose, are you trying to get in here?
So just quick couple points. I would like to see a more democratic process and a more open process. How that is balanced between the community at large and the board, I'd like to see some kind of balance there. I do agree that we need to have a process that can make timely decisions also. I think, yeah, those are my 3 points.
Okay. Next up.
I can go next.
Thanks, Martin.
I think what would be important is there should be, in addition to an executive board, there should be also a mechanism for new members to join the oversight board or leave the oversight board. I think this, as far as I know, isn't currently the case, and I think it would be important. I mean, at least, like, let's say in 10 years or so, like, I don't know, or in 20 years, like, yeah.
All right.
And Martin could, sorry, Mike, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. Martin, my fault, my connection cut out right as you were saying there should be a mechanism for new members to blank. What was it you were saying?
To join the board, to join the oversight board.
Okay, join the oversight committee. Okay, oversight board. Okay, thank you. Mike, your turn.
Right, yeah. I think there's two big problems here. There's kind of an operational problem that we're talking a whole lot about. And I think that the main operational problem that we're talking about can be fixed by giving an executive board most of the powers, most of the access rights, and allowing them to go and execute on what happens in the project. At the same time, it's concerning as a contributor that someone could end up working for an indefinite interval as an active member of the community, and that there's a more powerful group of people by virtue of their initial involvement with the project that can decide to up and change direction, can choose to disempower the executive board because they just don't like what they're doing or over a philosophical difference. And that's not to say that there needs to be any kind of change in the top-level board now, but I'd like to see some indication of a mechanism by which it can evolve as the actual community evolves, so that, 5 years from now, if I'm number 2 on commits, that the project can't just decide to get really popular with the community and everyone likes what's going on, that the direction can't get changed from my involvement. This is very similar to the same kinds of concerns that I think people had with the open pilot governance, in that it wasn't representative. Well, as the founders get further and further away from the day-to-day operations of the project, people who are chipping in have a similar kind of exposure now.
Is that, can I ask a question, Ken? Is that, are you, Mike, are you saying kind of on the same line as Martin, that there needs to be a way for people to leave the board, which there is, but and to be elected, new people to be elected to the board?
I think it would be great if we came up with a way that, to some extent, the interests of the legacy and the original founding principles can be protected. Maybe you declare a small number of directors to be directors forever, and that ultimately the rest of the directors are chosen by some kind of community process.
Just contributing my 2 cents. Would that could we say that there's a very long, like almost like senators versus representatives, and for the people out there who aren't familiar with U.S. 2, so we could have an executive committee that evolves very rapidly, whereas we could have an oversight committee that by nature only changes every 3 to 5 years. Is that an idea? I'm just throwing that out there. Is that an idea that has some traction?
I'd probably quibble with that a little bit. Just that 5 years is a very, very long time. But I have no fundamental problem with electing an executive committee every 6 months, and electing a board every year and a half or something on that order. Enough that it can continue to evolve with the community. That a new election isn't forever out, and that people see that if there's some kind of gulf, there is some prospect of actually reconciling it. And if some of the directors are permanent, if you keep a third of the board from original founders seeking to preserve the original founding interest, that's a very, very substantial protection of the original ideas and the original philosophy. It would be the community would have to be an active revolt to end up doing something different than that founding interest.
I think there's another option too, and where the say of the board gets diluted a little bit. So you could keep the board omnilocal as it is, but reduce its power in the project. They kind of get to the same place that way.
Understanding that, based on what Shaybud said, that is possible up to a legal limit. We board members have a legal obligation to the project, and indeed every single year we have to sign conflict of interest forms, that kind of things, for those kind of things. So I certainly think it's okay to reduce our power, but we have to remember that there is a limit.
I did have an idea with regards to that too, and I actually had to research whether this was legal. I mean, legally allowed. I'm not doing anything illegal here. There is a possibility to create rotating board positions, so that, say, you had the chairman of the executive committee would fill a rotating board position, and that would get this say into the community, say into the board, but not run into this problem that we get, that board members, they are by design difficult to get rid of, and the overturn is slow. The turnover, I'm sorry.
So that's a great point. Let me ask the community, do we have enough people to support multiple committees?
I don't think it's necessarily mutually opposed that you could have people from the community that are on the executive committee and on the board. I haven't been here from the beginning. I can't speak to what the correct structure would be, but the kind of thing that I end up thinking of is, okay, fine, pick a 6-person board so that it's not an unmanageable quantity. See that 2 of them rotate between people who have history with the project, so that founders still have their voices represented and that there's continuity. Elect 3 at large from the community and take the chair from the executive committee. Then it's really, really difficult for the direction of the project to change, and that you have to have basically everyone from the community agreeing on something. And but still, the voice is there if it becomes necessary.
May I step in here? One thing that you're always going to have in this sort of situation is the question of when you're trying to decide who the board is, who the executive board is, whatever. Obviously, for other nonprofit organizations and for other organizations in general, you generally have a membership that chooses it, and this is one of the key questions that hasn't been answered: is who votes? Who does have the ability to make such a vote and say who should be on the executive committee or the board or such? And I think that's something that if you are going to get to the point where these choices are going to be made outside of a consensus, then a membership does have to be created.
Well, so let's. I mean, what I'm hearing. So this, we've been talking about basic. You're addressing section C, so let's just jump to that. How would we choose voters?
Right now, the foundation has no members, so that would be a fundamental change to how it is. But you know, can happen. But though you're right, those are the people who would elect a board of directors. So that's a good question. I don't have the answer. How would that happen?
Yeah, clearly, the problem in this case is always going to be that there is really a small active membership base, and there will always be a small active membership base unless you have like a number of dedicated sponsors or such, in the way, once again, Drone Code and APM do, or Drone Code APM does, where they've got corporations involved. But in this situation, any membership is going to be extremely fluid, and it's going to change constantly. So that's going to be something very, very difficult. Is there any way to do this otherwise with purely a consensus? That's a question.
Does anyone out there have any ideas on how? I mean, that's a good point, Douglas. Does anyone out there have ideas about how we could resolve that? I know. Well, I'll call you out, Martin. I know we've had some discussions about how we might be able to think about things along the lines of merges or IRC participation or forum participation or excellence in testing. What do you see, Martin?
Sorry, I didn't pay attention. I was writing. Sorry, can you repeat yourself?
Well, I was saying, why don't you chime in, because I know you and I have had some discussions on this, and I'd like your input here on how would we choose the voters.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm actually not sure what the best method is. I mean, it should. I think in general it'd be good if even like people who are not programmers, right? If some people are very involved in the community, they maybe help on IRC or help on forum or write wiki pages. They should have some. It would be good for them if they actually had a vote in a process like that. I'm not sure what the best solution is for this. Like, do we somehow make a formal membership? And I mean, you know, it could cost like $10 per year. Like, make a symbolic figure, so that not everybody just joins, even if they have zero interest, or something like that. That could just cover the hosting costs for the foundation and stuff like that. That could be one way. And one concern could be that there could be. There could be just too many members who are not involved and just vote in every direction. But I'm not sure. Yeah, so something like that. I'm not sure.
Thoughts? Other people want to chime in on where we get voters?
Probably just let other people nominate them, and then if you get multiple people nominating someone, go with it.
AJ, would that mean that we have an unbounded growth in voters, or would that mean that we basically have a small cadre of voters who might be like 50 voters voting into a board of directors and oversight committee, which might make up 8 people out of the community?
I was thinking about at the executive committee level, sorry, not at the board level.
Got it. Can we get some board members in here? I know Dave and I have been active, and I know the board members have all expressed thoughts on this as well. Could we hear from you guys what you would like voters to kind of be like?
I think we could probably be fairly loose with who ends up being a voter. Anyone with a GitHub account or anyone who's active on forums or IRC, you need some basic kind of registration or something so we know who voted.
I'm sorry, Stacey, I lost you. Some kind of basic what? rule?
Some kind of basic registration so that we can know who voted, I guess, or at least contain any voting fraud.
Let's ask that question. Oh, sorry.
We can set it up based on, sorry. We can set it up based on a post count on the forum. So like only above 10 posts on the forum, someone is allowed to vote, and he can use the same login. That is the setup.
That's a great idea, Jose. How would we handle people who were very active one year and got 100 posts, and then 5 years later, they kind of want to become involved again? Do they still have voting rights the way you see it?
We can just count this year's votes or something like that. That's more like a technical issue for me. So the best last 5 years, or so I don't think that will be a problem. I don't see it as a problem. I'm more a technically inclined person, so for me the issues are purely technical, like access to the repository and what access to give to others. I know you guys discussed this previously, but I would prefer to write my thoughts on the chat. So one thing I wouldn't like to give access to the management team is the ability to add members with merging rights. So I think all the management team members should have merging rights, and if they don't need it because they are active in the merge, they can pass those rights to someone else. So imagine if the management board has 5 members, we have 5 guys with merging rights that can then pass those rights to someone else after a voting of the management board. So I know that that's something that Michael Lau is against, because he wants to give merging rights to whoever he wants. But one of the main points of the project was maintain high code quality, and for that reason, for me, giving merging rights to other people is a big deal. That's what I have to say. Thanks.
Awesome. So Mike points out that we're kind of moving a little past something that's a core problem. But I do want to ask one other question before we leave the question to voters behind. Do we consider voting fraud an issue? Is this a problem? Does anyone out there think that this is actually going to occur?
Not really.
I would think probably. And I would probably look at myself as paranoid 2 years ago, but we've seen trolls interested in derailing things. I would not put it past certain people to try and attempt that.
So, just from past experience on other projects, I think that maintaining an ability to detect or prevent voter fraud is in everybody's best interest. And since you're going to have to modify the founding documents anyway, come up with something that makes sense. 40 posts in the last year on the forum. You know, something that implies a level of commitment over time would seem to be both advantageous to getting a voting community that's actually participating and preventing fraud at the same time.
Okay.
As for myself, as someone who does come from the political field, has seen some tremendous voter fraud, and to be perfectly honest, has implemented some myself. It's something that will happen at some point. So as minor as this may seem right now, and we should always be striving for consensus, with the assumption that somewhere down the line something unpleasant is going to happen, especially if the project really takes off. I mean, if If this becomes something that is a source of profit to someone, obviously they're going to want to have a degree of control over it. So you're going to have to expect that to happen and just be ready for it. But I think in this initial phase right now, the best effort is to maybe set these tests up, strive for consensus, and then see how it goes later.
Okay. That's good thoughts. Jose, are you trying to chime in, or is that just mic noise?
Yes, no, sorry.
Okay. So that's good thoughts. Let's very briefly discuss how a democratically elected committee would look like. Is this 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, as many people as get X look like?
I think
You
3.
cut out, Ken.
I think the main
Sorry?
question is how many people should be in the executive committee. Is that correct?
Right. How many people should be in the executive committee?
I think it should be a small number of people, because the bigger the committee, the more lethargic it becomes. And I think three would be a good number because it's easy to break ties, or there can't be a tie basically.
For me, 42 is the answer.
$42 is the answer. Is that what you said, Jose?
Yeah.
All right. That's going down in the minutes. Ed? Sorry, David?
Something I thought about, and I don't know if we have the population, if you will, to support it, is you could have various committees of interest. So you could have a programming committee that would be, 4 or 5 people that are actively programming, a testing user group committee, anyway, forum committee, any aspects of the problem, and those committees would elect a chair, and the chairs of those 3, 4, 5 committees would make up the executive committee.
So you're thinking that the executive committee wouldn't be directly elected, but instead it'd be sort of like House committees where the members are elected to the subcommittees, and then each one decides amongst themselves for who is going to become, who's going to speak at the round table.
Yes, exactly. I don't know if we have the population of users to support that, but that could certainly, I don't know, I think that could work very well.
Do you think that is better than a tiny executive committee, or is it another option that we should just make sure we take off the table before we move forward?
Guys, my only comment would be look at the number of people in the call. That's pretty much going to be your max participation in this on a timely manner, right?
Well, but John, to point out, like committee questions for forums, that's generally going to be a pretty slow-moving committee, and with good reason. Whereas a testing group might meet once a month to go have an awesome fly-in, and a programmers group might meet every day on IRC informally.
I think my point was more along the lines of if you look at the total number of contributors on the forum and on IRC, you're going to come up with a number that's not very large. At the moment. At some point in time, hopefully that'll become a problem.
It's a nice problem to have, isn't it?
I think we actually make sure that there's kind of 2 bounds on this. We need a minimum number of people to be on that executive committee so that there's at least some variation in opinions, some diversity in opinions. But I think keeping the maximum fairly small is good too, just for practical reasons. The suggestion of 3 is kind of seems like a good minimum. Might also be a good maximum.
Quick point. 3 makes perfect sense because the whole purpose of the executive board is just to try and react quickly. Discussions can happen on the forums. The debates can happen on the forums. But when it's time to react, to make a decision, you need a small group of people that that is empowered, and that's the whole purpose of the executive board.
Okay. So let's. It sounds like we've got a.
Hello. I'm lost. I'm a bit lost. Sorry. Yeah, I'm a bit lost. I'm Jose. I'm a bit lost. So, how many teams are we talking about? I've heard of a management team, now an executive team. Sorry, but I'm a bit lost. English is not so easy for me to follow. Sorry.
I think this is probably my fault for initially introducing it as a management board, but I think that David has pointed out that more properly said, according to our bylaws, it is it's an executive committee. Does that make sense?
Okay, Roger.
So, I think I'm hearing a lot of consensus. There's certainly good discussion to be had here, but I think there's enough consensus we can move on for the moment. Again, understanding that no problems have been resolved today. We're just feeling out how uniform our opinions are about what things can look like. So we've discussed a fair amount. Are there other options out there that we haven't looked at? Does anyone have a novel idea? We've already heard from David that it doesn't have to be just an executive committee.
So one thing
that go to the executive committee.
I'm just still not sure what the powers the executive team or something like that want. What powers do they need?
That's a fair question. So anybody want to kind of chime in with what they'd like to see?
Sure. So I think the executive committee should be very broadly empowered. In all my experience in business, I've worked with very active boards of directors that are engaging in oversight, are actively watching the process, asking questions. Very, very rarely would the board be looking to actually exercise any kind of decision-making process about, code process or any of these types of things. That would be delegated to the executive team and the people who had expertise in the individual areas. The other thing that I think that's really important that hasn't been mentioned is transparency. Both overall board meetings and executive team meetings should be made as publicly as possible. We should be shouting from the rooftops what we're doing and the basis on which our choices are made. We should listen to everyone's voices during these actual discussions. There are some things that have to happen in private. Anything that involves a negotiation, maybe sensitive things when there's a dispute between a couple people that we're arbitrating, but I don't see a reason for all of the secrecy. I think things could be very transparent.
And Mike, to be fair, there's actually no secrecy. The TauLabs board meets once a year, and that meeting is generally David saying, does everybody agree that our budget is $30 for last year, and Vince has provided those $30, and we all say yes, and then we're done. So, it's perfectly transparent. It seems opaque, but
Ken?
in fact, it's 100% transparent because there's nothing going on.
Well,
Ken, that's not quite right. So discussions by email occur sort of throughout the year. I think that's probably more what Mike's referring to. The decision making, the ongoing decision making.
Right. I've referred decisions to the board twice. I've never heard anything back or anything about how the actual decision was made. I didn't see any of the process along the way. I have no idea what individual people think about these things or what needs to change in order to convince people on these points. I just heard nothing, and then eventually, after asking after a while, I was told, oh yeah, we decided no, and we weren't really excited about this idea in general. That's difficult. That's troubling.
I agree, Mike, and I think we've already discussed there's no reason why, other than the fact that it just took me 30 seconds to set up an email forwarder, I think it just needs to be set up. I don't think there's any desire to keep it closed from any of the board members.
I agree. I see no problem in making our discussions public.
It just needs to be done. So I can I can probably take another action item to do that.
Yeah. So going back again to the powers, and sorry for me to keep eating this thing, but I think it was Michael who said that he would like the powers to be as broad as possible. I think that was the term. So what will be the difference and what will separate between this new team and the OmniLocal board in terms of powers? That's the question, sorry.
The board can fire the executive committee if they're being completely untrue to the project or the process is overall broken, right?
Okay.
So there needs to be oversight. Now, ultimately, I think that the board membership should evolve to represent the community too, with a longer kind of term and with representation from people who originally founded the project, so that the executive committee doesn't have to watch their back or feel that they need to vet every policy decision with the board.
Okay, so a more practical question. What would you think about a certain PR that is ready to be merged, and this new team has this new executive team has the power to merge it, but for some reason one of the OmniLocal board members doesn't think that that code is appropriate to be merged to the main tree, and it says no. Let's stop. Let's make this into. Let's take this into a voting process between the executive team and the OmniLocal board team. What would you think about it? About this situation in particular?
I think there's nothing stopping from board members being in the committee. And then if the committee were to agree with some kind of quorum to elevate it to the board, perhaps something like that could work.
I think realistically there's no reason ever that the board should ever be able to overrule code that someone is submitting through the standard process. In fact, I think that is like something we should look to avoid having happen at all. And like if in the case where you're like, I don't want this to go through, you personally become responsible for making a new version of the thing that you're saying no to.
Okay, because that process or similar process exists and it was used between OmniLocal board members. So there was a discussion between two board members, and the issue, the PR was taken to a vote, and a decision was made. So this is not something we are inventing right now because of the new team. It's something that we already used in the past. So we aren't against it. When I make this question, I'm not against the new team. I'm not against anyone. I just know that these kind of situations have happened in the past, and having a board with the capability to vote on something and knowing the history of the project and the infrastructure of the code. We have Stacy here who mostly wrote the flight firmware all. Me and Edward, most of the GCS framework, we wrote it. So we have a lot of history in the project, and I think that's a new coder may have a good opinion about a part of the code, but he may be missing the big picture that the board member, due to the history and the time they have spent looking and messing with the code. They have.
So Jose, I think practically, what would be suggested is the executive committee handles that, right? That's the whole idea here, is to bring it closer to the community, the governance, with the board of directors holding the override card that would ideally never ever be used, but it would be there.
So this is good stuff. It's very specific though, and so I think these are the kind of decisions that could be made once we agree fundamentally that this is the way we want to go forward. Obviously, these things need to get hammered out, but none of these little details are what are going to sink the ship. They just will lead to compromises. Mike has been writing the side channel some very good, cogent thoughts. There's a bit of a discussion there as well. So there's not a clear answer on how it should be, but it sounds like we still have a lot of. It sounds like we are more agreeing than disagreeing about the powers. And we have heard a lot from people about drawing the line on open source and closed source hardware. What I haven't heard from is the other board. If the community wants open source and closed source, or open hardware and closed hardware, and we want to stay true to our original founding ideal, are we able to find some common ground? What do we do? So, board members.
So the way I see it, I would prefer not having closed hardware on our tree, but it is not something where I will draw a line. But the way I see it, once we open our repo to commercial or close to the source hardware, they need to share the project expenses, for example, and at least share hardware with the most active developers at the time.
Okay. Other core members, what do we feel about open hardware versus closed hardware?
I would feel if somebody is willing to maintain it, it'd be my preference is always going to be open hardware, but I'm a tinkerer. I want to have the schematics there, so if something breaks, I know where to start looking. But if somebody were willing to maintain it, I wouldn't have any personal opposition to it being included, if it met certain criteria, of course, and standard coding standards of the project, that kind of criteria.
I think the person I primarily want to hear from is Martin, Heli Shredder. I've done some work in closed hardware stuff, mostly around his board, and he probably has the most experience with running a closed hardware board and doing branding stuff and having to distribute his own software and stuff like that. So.
Yes, I mean, for me personally, it would be nice to have Brain included in TauLabs, of course, because it would actually make it very easy for other TauLabs developer to work, for example, on the OSD code that currently, hopefully in the future, also the Tau OSD will run, but at the moment only runs on Brain. So that would make it easier from my side. I may still distribute my own version of the GCS for general users. I mean, like the vast majority of users are not frequenting the TauLabs forums, or they're just happy with using the Brain, and they can download the software that I distribute. But I think it would be nice if anyone could use the Brain directly with TauLabs, so they don't have to use multiple different GCS versions and so on. For me, I think as a company, making open source hardware is really not a viable business. Like it's fun for a hobby project, but if you're actually investing a significant amount of money into developing something new, especially if it's not just a small modification of existing board, I don't think I would open the hardware, at least in the beginning, or even the schematic, because it goes very fast. I mean, we've seen with Sparky 2, there are already clones on the market, and people don't respect hardware licenses. Even if you license it non-commercial, they don't care about it. So I don't know. I think it would be nice to have closed hardware in the tree, but I think there should be maintainers to actually maintain these targets. And if they drop away, and if a company just comes and drops code for a target and then doesn't maintain it and the target breaks, I think it should also be removed from the tree.
So let me just chime in. So I'm not sure how many people know that I am, in addition to being a co-founder of TauLabs, I am the technical lead and inventor of a drone that is entering the market this next year from the company Sci-Fi Works. So we've already pre-sold 1,500 of them. There will certainly be, our goal is 1 million. So when we have 1 million users and they're all using TauLabs, what obligation does TauLabs have to us if TauLabs includes our board as a target? And what obligations do we have to TauLabs? Because we can sort of, if we're not careful, we can sync TauLabs. If we send 1 million users to the TauLabs board, well, we're jerks, we're assholes for doing it, but it's not going to resolve the problem. So I'm not suggesting what we should do or should not do, but I am throwing out there that Martin's points are good and valid, but we want to be careful when we discuss including closed source hardware, because we might find a maintainer who wants to do Sci-Fi Works' level 1 board, but where do we go when that so heavily weighs in more than all of the other open source targets and closed source targets combined?
But that's kind of a different question, right? I mean, like, the same could happen with, like, I could make a very, very, like I said, say I'm a billionaire and I make a very cheap open source board, and suddenly TauLabs has 2 million users. They will weigh in very heavily, right? I mean, this is kind of, I don't think it matters if the hardware is open or closed. Granted, it's more likely that a closed source will be more available, but I'm not sure if this is a real concern, to be honest.
Okay. Stacy, you're making a few points on the side. Would you like to get them out there for the YouTube crowd?
Sure. So on the topic of supporting closed hardware, I mean, there's a few things that kind of come to mind there. They're not all necessarily deal breakers, but there's if large changes go into the code base, it can actually now touch a whole bunch of commercial products, the source for commercial products. So that's kind of one side of it. So there's potential for conflict. On the other side, you can also have the commercial vendors showing up with sort of sweeping changes to some core code, and trying to push that in. So maybe that's good, maybe that's not. It depends on kind of how that change then ripples out through other open source boards and also other commercial boards. It ends up being a bunch of things to, I guess, to just consider before opening the floodgates.
So moving past this, is there? I'd like to get to. So I think everybody's made excellent points, and we're probably getting a little tired. I know Jose, for instance, is looking at the clock and wondering when midnight's going to hit. What are action items moving forward? What do we do, and who's going to do it?
I'll do anything.
Sorry, who was it that said that? Who will do anything? I'm gonna hold you to it.
I'll definitely do it. You tell me something to do, man, I'll do it.
All right. So before we get to who's going to do it, what do we need to do as next steps?
I think.
Whoop! 2 people at once. Please. Okay, so those are great points. What are our action items to move to that future? What do we do?
I think, to chime in here, I think what we'd probably have consensus on here is that the first step, at least to have a short-term executive board there to start to put forth a plan of action. If you get those 3 people that that understand these issues, that are extremely active and ready to go, then they can put together a plan for the overall board to approve. But you need to have the team, and that would be in this case an executive committee to start that.
And procedurally, that would be your way forward, right? You would have to submit a proposal, and it would have to be voted on. So somebody would submit a proposal. We propose forming this executive committee. You know, maybe have a meeting time in IRC, and somebody, you know, everyone can say, oh, I want IC, I want, you know, T. Greer, I don't know, you know, anyway, put that as a proposal to the board, and then that executive committee would get elected.
Does that have to be submitted by one of the existing board member, or is that public?
I think what David was just suggesting was that this would be public. So,
okay, cool.
And there's no reason why these ideas would have to come from internal. We are not a cabal. We do not have large discussions. Get out, but they're usually very short. This year has been highly active. We probably had 6 discussions. Last year was less active. Can propose anything, and I think we just need to do much better about making sure that situations like what Mike ran into don't arise, where a question goes to the board and there's no answer. But to reiterate, in case I cut out that suggestion, make that proposal, and I would like someone now to say, I'm going to be the one who makes that proposal. Obviously, you can pull people in to help you, but I would like one person to take charge of that.
So what are we're talking about putting together a governance model document and making a proposal to the board with that? Is that?
That's a good question. David, I thought we were talking about a little more.
You're breaking up.
Board, the TauLabs board can try it on for size, so to speak. We can get the ball rolling right away, and we can see if this really is.
Right. Yeah. I think you're cutting out a little bit, but I think I know what you're saying. What we're saying is Ken's asking somebody to step up and say, I'm going to write a proposal that an executive committee be formed. I asked the majority of users, and these 3, 4, 5 people are the suggested members of the executive committee, and here's the powers that they would have. And then the board would vote on it, and if it was the will of the community, I would almost be certain that the board would accept that. So he's asking for somebody to say, I will do that.
It sounds like the whole team is going to do it. Everyone's going to do it.
No. I love that idea, but Martin knows that I'm currently channeling Chi Wan, who is the guy who stepped in to take over the project management from me. If somebody doesn't own it, it doesn't happen. One person has to be in charge of this.
I think Michael has put himself forward for it.
Here's what I would think. I would be willing to chair a committee or work on a committee or whatever in order to put this document together. Let's put together a temporary executive committee, temporarily empower the executive committee with day-to-day running in whatever form we're all comfortable with. And then, have the executive committee, let's publish the existing bylaws and the existing documents that are associated with the Omni Loco Foundation, and the executive committee can work in public to draft this document about what the recommended changes to bylaws, what the recommended changes to policies are, and just kind of principles that we envision all of these things working on going forward, as well as the actual formal policy documents.
I am all for that. To respond to Thomas's point about why doesn't the TauLabs board do it, I think we got here because the TauLabs board is busy with life. I don't see that's likely to change. And to be honest, I think David has very cogently put out the framework in which this could exist initially. So if the community is willing to put this together, I think we are willing to act on it very quickly. But I do think it's very important that the community have a lot of involvement, and maybe the majority of involvement, so that we know that we are doing what the community wants and not just what we think the community wants.
Sorry, quick question in the chat there. I just wanted to speak it out for anyone who missed it. Is it safe to assume that the document that we're proposing or talking about proposing now is going to have the support of someone on the board to be able to review it and say this is into compliance, or this is out of compliance, or this is completely out of line, or basically, is it safe to assume that we'll be able to have those conversations within the next couple of weeks or next week or so? Like, I would rather see that process happen in a timely fashion as opposed to a lengthy one.
I would offer to review it. I'm fairly familiar with the legality of what we can or can't do. I would be willing to. If you put that together, I'd say, yeah, that's definitely within the bylaws, or that would require changes to the entire foundation. Anyway, I'd be willing to review it.
Awesome.
Okay, so did I understand that Mike is going to head up the proposal for an executive committee, and David will vet that for compliance with our bylaws, and we can move on this within a very short amount of time? Is that, am I capturing the mood?
Silence is yes.
I think we're all trying to type at the same time. So I was just saying, I think that the proposal shouldn't be too far-reaching. Like, you just want to put a proposal together to put the executive committee in place, and then probably submit additional proposals after that for any other stuff that you want to change. And then we can get this one out the door quite quickly. I don't know if that's sensible.
That could be a good idea. Propose to say, here's the people we propose to be on the executive committee, and then, they could be elected, and then the board say, the executive committee, these are the powers we want, and that would be approved, by the board.
Yeah, so kind of like a multi-step process, I guess. Not trying to stuff it all into one document is what I was getting at.
And David, I assume there's no problems with publishing the existing bylaws relatively quickly?
No. In fact, I believe the old ones are there. We're in a bit of a transition. We're moving from an Idaho corporation from a Nevada corporation to an Idaho corporation. So I'll publish the ones that we've accepted. I'm pretty sure, I'd have to double check, but we've accepted new bylaws that basically point at Idaho state law instead of Nevada state law. But yeah, that can happen very quickly. What I'm getting with it is that the old laws, I'm pretty sure, are published, but we can make them much easier to go to.
Perfect. And with regard to the change from Las Vegas to Idaho, there's nothing that should fundamentally affect the forming of the executive committee.
No. very little changed. Like I said, the vast majority of it was just pointing from Nevada state law to Idaho state law.
Perfect.
So I believe I do have those 2 action items to publish that within the next few days, those 2 points, and to look at opening up making public the email discussions that happened between the board.
Okay, so I have then 2 action items on the agenda. The first is that the first is short, and that's Chebaz gets the bylaws out there again, just to draw everyone's attention to it. The second, and this is the official minutes, so to speak. So speak now or forever hold your peace. Committee. The gist of the committee is these are the powers we want.
Well, Ken, you know, every time you speak, I only get every other word, and that was a good dropout. So.
Okay. I'm gonna write it here.
And then it was dropped for about 10 seconds.
2 action items. 1, Chebaz publishes new bylaws. 2.
Good.
Mike proposes a temporary committee. These are the powers we want. David will vet that, and the board will vote on the proposal. Does everyone, did I get that right?
So I think that's right, but I would like to ask one question, and Michael's probably the only one who can answer this at the moment. The whole point of this call is to avoid a fork, to keep everybody together as a community. Are we all happy that we can spend 2 weeks doing this? And I guess, Michael, that's probably aimed at you more targeted than anybody else.
I'm going to step in and let Mike answer, but I'm going to say the point of this call was not to avoid a fork. The point of this call is to address very serious and legitimate community concerns. If a fork is the right thing for Mike, then Mike has our blessing. But that doesn't mean we can't improve.
No, fair enough, and it was a bad way of putting the terms. From a user standpoint, I'd like to not have another piece of software to run, right?
Sure. But fair. Mike, your question.
Yeah, so I think what we probably do is we sit in our own tree for now, just because we don't know what the outcome is going to be, and it doesn't make sense to, reintegrate and then have to tear everything apart again. And there may even be reasons in the long term, even if we're really closely working with Tau, to have like a beta flight or something like that. So, this may be something that we would even keep kind of going forward. I'm willing to slow down the things that we're doing with rebranding and changes that would be really, really strongly contradictory with Tau, just in the hopes that things can work out and that we can all be on the same team again.
Sounds like a definite maybe.
Okay.
Well, so basically, I'm not going to do anything to widen the gulf, right? We're kind of in limbo right now. We can sit in limbo for a couple weeks while we figure out whether we can work together effectively.
So it sounds like it certainly has the possibility, and if it happens, you might, yeah, I don't know.
It's worth seeing whether we can get this done. I also don't want to unfork to fork again 2 weeks from now. So we will work to integrate and see what happens.
Okay. So I'm not going to close the conversation. I'm going to say that my part is done. I think we have action steps. I think there's a lot more conversation, and Jose would like to talk about some of the things because we missed out from his 2 minutes in the beginning because he couldn't join. I'm going to bow out. I have responsibilities. But guys, this has been incredible. This is, reaffirming of spirit and soul of the project. I hear so much agreement and so few spots where we can't instantly get along. I'm sure we're going to push through it. So with that, I'm going to head out. But Jose, why don't you take the floor? And sounds like Stack's around for another 6 minutes. So why don't you take the floor, Jose? The rest of you guys, I wish you the best, and I look forward to talking with you on the forums. Take care.
Thanks, Ken.
Yeah, Ken, thank you very much.
I think Ken got me wrong. My comment was just because the two action items he referred was the creation of a document and the voting. And what I said was that we should discuss points of disagreement. So we don't have to vote yes or no. We can discuss after the document is created. If there are points of disagreement and come to an agreement. It doesn't have to be an isolated decision. It can be discussed.
Right. So, like, you'd like Mike to kind of do it publicly, throw it together publicly, so we can put input on it.
Yeah, sure. Imagine that there's a small point we don't agree, but the other points we do agree. I think that these agreement points should be discussed and not reached with a no vote.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I completely agree. I think we should pick, a couple people to work closely with me and actively, but I think 100% of the work we'll do on IRC, Google Docs, and a mailing list. So anyone can give their feelings, and the community can continue to be involved in drafting this document and the existing board.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. So when's the next meetup?
Every few weeks until we get it right, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Until you get sick of my voice and my jokes.
I do think that this is really difficult to get everyone together, but there's just such value from talking to each other. I mean, it's very hard to be as mad or feel quite as much in conflict when we're talking to each other and we can look at each other over the video chat. So the community should find some way to have events like this going forward.
Sure, like a weekly or monthly hangout?
Every
absolutely. Definitely.
And hopefully most of the time we're not talking about project structure. We're looking at videos of people in the project that have done neat stuff and, brainstorming for neat ideas about what to do,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy with what the discussion that happened here. I think good things will come of it. But I'm going to bow out to thank you all for being here.
Okay, bye.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. I gotta take off too.
See y'all.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
Nice to put a face to the name.
I should actually leave soon as well.
See you guys.
Have a good
Okay,
one, everybody.
I think we're agreed that everyone's leaving.
It seems like it. All right.
It's good
Bye.
to see you again, Martin. See you.
How about drinks, man? No drinks?